friends. Welcome to Chai with the Chowdhurys, where we're always spilling the tea. I'm your host, Priya.
And I'm Mahfuz Chowdhury.
So, what are we spilling the tea on today, Mahfuz?
Priya, we're back. We're back for episode 2. They talk about consistency, and consistency usually means make sure you stick with the routine. And our routine, I would say, is pretty easy, once a year. And to celebrate our anniversary, we've made a beautiful decision to gift ourselves with recording yet another episode to share what I'm really excited about, which is reflecting back to our second year of marriage. When I take a look at the first year of marriage, and for anyone watching that hasn't had a chance to visit that, we'll put a link in here somewhere so that they could review that because I think it's worth listening to some of the good, the bad, the ugly of first year marriages that is very common to a lot of people. But when I look back at that episode and I use it to reflect back on our relationship, really excited about the long term archive where one day we can sit and watch every episode to remember what happened every year. But the theme that comes to mind when I take a look at it is I would call the first year the year of discovery. We're learning how to be a husband and wife with each other. We're learning how to deal with each other's habits and amplify each other to make sure that we still feel like it's our home.
Right.
And we're learning how to be with each other every single day in a different way beyond when we were first in our dating relationship. So the year of discovery seems like the right phrase to call our first year of marriage. I'm curious to get your thoughts on when you reflect back on your second year,
Mhm.
what would you categorize our second year as?
I think our second year would be the year of growth
Hmm.
because, we took what we learned about each other in our first year, and now we're using that to set ourselves for the years to come, right? So we're growing every day through everything that we do, through our travels, through different projects that we're working on, through our work, even just day to day growing on how we are with each other. Um, but yeah, I think it's the year of growth for us.
I like that a lot. Actually, when I think about the year of discovery, I don't think the part of discovery ends. We're still learning how to be with each other every day. So it's not to say, hey, let's stop discovering each other and move into growth. But
Mhm.
now it's kind of like stacking on the next level in our relationship. The first year was about understanding how each of us are. And as we're evolving, you and me, the importance of still understanding each other, I think, still needs to coexist.
Mhm.
But I like what you're saying about growth because instead of us trying to learn about our past memories and our past behaviors that made us who we are, we're also looking forward together. And I got to tell you, before you and I ever met, I've always had this ongoing concern in the back of my mind about what a relationship would look like and how it impacts my hustle and the things that I do on the side. And I've always been under the impression that I'd almost have to sacrifice a bit of the hustle to focus on the relationship. And it almost felt like a trade off. And I almost thought I would be guilty that I'm focusing too much on our hustle. And if I'm spending too much time there, it means I'm spending less time focusing on our relationship. What's been really optimistic to me, I got to tell you, and I think why calling it the year of growth makes absolute sense, is I now realize that it actually can complement each other. And if it's with the right partner, it doesn't take away from the relationship when you're out there trying to build your life and do the things that you're passionate about. But if you work together and both of you have a very similar overlapping passion that you want to achieve together, you actually get to become teammates
Right.
and you get to build out of each other's strengths and work on each other's dreams together. And I felt like we've done that in many, many different ways this year.
I think we have set a lot of motions and just things in place for the growth to happen. So, for example, like, when we're traveling, after the travel is done, or even like while we're traveling, we come together, we have a series of questions, we ask each other, what we learned from each of our travels, how we
Mm.
can improve. And some beautiful things have come out of it, right? Like, one thing I want to highlight was that, so we're both coffee drinkers.
Yep.
And one thing we noticed was that when we're traveling to different, like, Airbnbs and hotels and things like that, they don't necessarily always have the coffee that we enjoy. And what we started doing is just like carrying our like instant mix coffee with us. So we're never giving it away. Like, we always have what we need to have like a really good day,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's like one of the things that came out of our growth conversations for travel, right?
Yeah, and it's always fun in the middle of our travel where we're in a unique environment and we're almost a little bit uncomfortable because we don't live there and we're seeing it for the first time. And we use that as our moment to sit down and plan our life out a little bit because we're almost inspired by something new we saw, whether it's a new culture, whether it's a new business, whether it's a new restaurant we're in. We're always kind of using that inspiration to bring back into what we want to do about it. Some of my favorite moments is the fact that we now do a lot of things together that I used to do alone. Like, I love that when we're thinking about developing our brand, we sit down together with a designer and we give our input together and we review the work together and we sign off together. I love that when we're trying to find storage facilities and suppliers for our business, we're actually looking at it together and we're doing the interviews together. And to me, I feel like that collaboration allows me to not have to make the decisions myself, but actually get some input. And sometimes we disagree with each other and it makes the product better as a result of that. Like the logo that we launched, I feel like looks way better because of your input and pushbacks. Where I actually liked the first one so much, I was ready to sign off. And now that I look back, I'm like, whew, we dodged a bullet there. I was like, I'm really, really glad we listened to that together. So doing things together, I think, has become some of my favorite things to do. And
Mine too.
I think the year of discovery helped a lot with that because we also need to know how to communicate with each
Right.
other's personality styles that allows us to get ahead there.
And what I love is that I have so much fun doing everything with you. Like, I think that's where the teamwork in us comes in from. Like, because we both work full time, we often have to do a lot of our things like earlier in the mornings, like super early, or like later in the evening. And I love that I have to give up my Netflix session so I can do these things with you, right? Because I just enjoy it so much. Like, it's actually, and I feel like if I didn't enjoy it as much as I do, then I wouldn't have done it, right? Like, I am a firm believer of like, if, and also I practice this and I preach this, that like, if I'm not enjoying something, I'm not going to do it, right? Like,
Hmm.
naturally, when we're doing these things, we're building for our future. It just comes naturally to me, and it's also like just so enjoyable to do it with you.
I think what's a very healthy practice is to try to make time to do the things that you love. And for some people, it's a very different hobby from their work. For some people, it's actually unwinding and unplugging and watching Netflix and their favorite shows. It just so happens that what we love doing is the work that we do together. So the fact that we get up in the morning and get excited about getting work done, and then after business hours, we're like, let's do something else. Let's work on this other thing. I mean, we're here recording a podcast when we could have been doing anything today, right? And it just shows you the love for wanting to get together and collaborate on amazing things. And we didn't get a chance to talk about this in our first year, but one of the things that was really, really attractive to me when we first started dating is not a lot of people know this, but we actually worked on a business project when we were just dating.
Mhm.
I remember like we sat down one day because it was the strange pandemic time where all the restaurants were closed and we couldn't go anywhere. So a lot of our date nights were like taking takeout and just chilling in the car. And I remember one of our conversations in the car, you brought up the idea of creating a productivity journal. And the idea got me so hyped. And naturally, the guy in me pulls out a notepad and starts drawing pros and cons and a business plan in the back seat. And then before you know it, we launched a productivity journal that's 2 years in. And it's amazing that I've got to see that side of you at a very early in our relationship. And yeah, 3 years, you're absolutely right, with our dating in mind. And it's exciting because it gave me a lot of insight to what's to come.
Right.
And I got to tell you, Priya, like long before we met, when I was in high school, I always had a passion for whoever my partner was. Imagine me in a cafeteria sitting across the girlfriend I was seeing in high school. And I was like, I don't remember, I think I brought like a sandwich from home and I sat across and I was like, what do you want? What do you want to achieve in life? Because I want to help you get it. And whatever the answer was, I was willing to figure it out. That was just always the guy in me. And
Right.
I get excited about the fact that I get to do that with my wife every day, is have that conversation of saying, what do you want? And then you ask me right back, what do I want? And I feel like we constantly go to bat to try to help each other's passions come to life.
Like, speaking of passions, one amazing passion came to fruition for you this year, right? Which was your TEDx. And talk about growth for that, right? Like, and discovering what we wanted our future to look like. Even early on in our dating, you mentioned that like TEDx was, um, like you would have liked to achieve the TEDx stage one day, right? And when we got the news, like I was like literally in tears, and the universe, God, like, like you just didn't get one TEDx. You were able to achieve three.
Yeah, it was insane.
And I remember we were actually back home visiting Bangladesh, and you took like the TEDx interview at like 2:30 a.m. My family back home, they do stay up quite late, and we do have a big family, and they were like screaming, and not screaming, like they were enjoying themselves in the background. And I could hear Mahfuz like, going into our room and doing this interview for one of his TEDx's. So talk about like dedication, right? Like the dedication, and like I'm like so proud of you. You did so well. I'm so excited for the video to come. You were amazing.
Thank you. You are without a doubt my biggest cheerleader. You attended all three of those events and you were at the front row seat. And I can't tell you the amount of relief it brings when you have this nerve-wracking feeling sneaking up behind you just as you're about to approach the stage, and you get to see your supportive wife sitting in the front row. And I shared a lot of like behind the scenes footage from those three events, but I got to tell you the clip that I love the most is that one camera shot where someone caught where you're standing up screaming at the top of your lungs at the end of my talk and initiating a standing ovation that everyone else followed. And you could see like I'm looking at you and I like can't even contain myself. Like I'm shaking, I'm rocking back and forth because all the adrenaline is building up. But it just made me so proud of having a wife like you. Like I was like, man, you helped with not just encourage me to apply and do the work and rehearse every day around the kitchen island, but also like right down to like what is my attire for that event and what makes sense to stay on brand and what are some cool things that I could introduce in that talk that allows me to truly be me. That TEDx is not a Mahfuz TEDx. That's a Mahfuz and Priya event. And that's how I always see it. I see that we did it. We achieved that together. And it was you rooting for me that allowed me to do that. And I always want to be their kind of husband that gives that back to you. I constantly think about what is it that I could give Priya in the same way that she gives to me in a lot of these things that I'm achieving. And I constantly think about your passions around content creation, around traveling, around doing so many beautifully, you have so much talent in design and aesthetics. And being on this journey with you of discovery and trying to figure out all the different things you could do with this talent of yours gets me so excited. And it allows us over and over again to kick off new initiatives, which always gets me pumped.
And you have done that. Like, I think the journal, just going back to the journal a little bit, like, ever since I was little, I've been into like little like stationery items, like pens, papers. I used to have like not necessarily a journal, but a notebook for like every year of my life. And, I just used something like that daily. And I thought to myself when I was younger that wouldn't it be so cool to even like make something like this? And then here I was just mentioning this idea to you, and it did come to fruition. And, I use our journal every day. And now we're building like a whole other brand, um, using the journal as a start, right? Like, so it's so interesting. And then you have done that. And even though TEDx was like all you, like I'm just like cheering you on from the sidelines. It was definitely like all you. So you give yourself some credit, but yeah, it's beautiful how we started off dating, talking about things that we would like to happen in year one, where you were living, obviously married, living together, discovering, and then now we're in the growth portion where we are able to execute and see some of those things that we started, um, flow into other beautiful things, right? And I think that's a beautiful relationship.
In many ways, I love that we finished our first year of marriage video talking about the book launch, which was just the last thing that happened before we recorded our 1 year anniversary video. And I think in many ways it set tone the year of growth. We're about to put things into the marketplace. We're about to put things into the universe that is meant to get us further in life and allow us to pursue the dreams that we always have. But with a lot of great things happening in our life, we also can't ignore the fact that it also comes with challenges.
Mhm.
And we talked a lot about it in year one, where we said in discovery, there's two personalities coming together, and both of them have had a completely different upbringing, completely different set of beliefs, completely different experiences in life. For you to think you can bring those two people to live together and not have challenges is absolutely ludicrous. And there's a common saying in parenting where they call the second year of raising your child as the terrible twos. And it's called terrible twos because of the fact that your children is coming to an age where they're starting to be aware of cause and effect and things that they could manipulate in their favor, and they're starting to really become unconscious in their own being. And sometimes that's tough as a parent and is very exhausting. So terrible twos is a very common phrase in the world of parenting. I'm curious if you think terrible twos also applies in marriages as well.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say it's terrible, right? Like, but I think there is a part of it that exists, meaning that there were challenges, right? Because with the discovery phase and with year one in our marriage, it was like the honeymoon stage, right? Like where we're starting to live together. You and I, we've never lived with anyone, so that was exciting. We moved into our new home, that was exciting. We were preparing for our housewarmings, things like that, buying furniture, things like that. So those are all exciting things. We had a lot of things to look forward to. When year two hit, it's sort of like, okay, now we are a couple, now we're married. All of those honeymoon things are already done. What are we
Hmm.
doing now? And with that, it comes challenges because, with our, as you mentioned, with our upbringings, um, and, just the environment that we grew up in, um, there are differences, right? And, but I would like to point out, like, how we came forth apart from the challenges that we were having, how we came over those things. I think that's what we have to credit, right? Like every relationship is going to go through challenges. There is not no such thing as a perfect relationship. Like if looking back, like I truly love my sister, but I've had so many
Yeah.
sisterly fights with her.
Hmm.
Same with my parents, right? Like because you love a person so much, you're obviously going to have challenges, right? And I would like to take this back to an issue that we had, not an issue, but like
It's an issue.
yeah, I don't
Let's
know what the
let's
word
let's call
is.
it let's call a duck a duck. We've had issues. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And like an issue that now looking back at it, I'm like, was that actually an issue? Like it was
Hmm.
so small, right? Like,
Yeah.
but like one thing, like, what happened was, I think one day we were trying to as I mentioned before, we're both coffee drinkers. And, the first thing that we do early in the morning is have our coffee. I don't care if it's bad. I know we might have people saying that it's not good to drink coffee first thing in the morning. It's fine. That's what we are doing. It's our habit. And we, like, I think over the weekends we started to make some pretty big decisions,
Yeah.
and like without having our first sip of coffee, like I think these decisions, they had to be made, and I think we were under the impression that, let's just get these things out of the way without even getting our day started. If you're in the habit of doing something and you take that out completely, and then you're trying to make these like pretty big decisions about like pretty big life decisions, and I need my first sip of coffee, like you're obviously going to get into like some sort of issue, right? Like I want to point out, like, what came out after that is that, we sat down and we talked about it, and we understood that, we can't be making big decisions unless we are in the right state of mind,
Yeah.
right? And I
Mm.
think and that's just an example.
Yeah.
Like as this example, there were many times such as this where, we didn't really agree with each other. We butted heads a little bit, but what I like is after that happens, we take some time apart and then we get back to each other and we talk about what the issue was and like try to solve it, right? And talk about how we can like move past this, right? And that's just like one of the things that came out, that where, we can be making big decisions like early on in the morning, or
Yeah.
maybe like when we don't when we're rushed, or when we need that first sip of coffee.
And I think there's a lot to say about why those big decision conversations shouldn't happen first thing in the morning before coffee. I mean, yes, being caffeinated and getting the crankiness out of the way is an important thing, but sometimes when you wake up first thing in the morning, that's not what's on your mind. And if that's not in either one of our mind, it starts to become a conflict because you're thinking of like, what do I have to do in the day? I don't know about you, but my morning usually starts with something that I don't highly recommend when you're looking for some great mental health space. I'm thinking a lot about what do I have to tackle down today. And sometimes if there's a email that came in last night, I'm even thinking like, how do I respond to this email?
Right.
It's a little tricky to navigate through. And what are some things that's on my priority list? So for either of us to interject a big discussion at the morning before we even get through those to-do lists naturally will lead to some challenges and conflicts.
Right.
And I think that one of the things that we have to accept is that when we're doing so many different things, we have so many things in our to-do list. And the real challenge is that the order from A to Z for me won't be the same order from A to Z for you. So sometimes you come in and be like, hey, we need to deal with my A.
Yeah.
But I'm like, my A is like your D,
Right.
right? And I want to talk about D. And so it becomes this conflict of which one are we talking about? And, admittedly, my patience is very, very thin sometimes. So if we're not getting to D right away and we're not seeing actionable items on D right away, I start getting a little irritated and you still want to get A done. And I think one of those things noting is that if we're going to live a life where we have so many plates spinning, and we're trying to get them when we're trying to keep them all spinning at the same time, there needs to be an understanding that what you're spinning and what I'm spinning might be two very, very different things. And one where I have to give you a lot of credit for is in a lot of those issues and a lot of those conflicts, you're usually that first step that says, let's actually chill and like solve it, or let's actually not walk away from the problem, or let's not carry it through to another day. Let's try to resolve it tonight. And I think that that's a hard thing to do sometimes. It's definitely a hard thing for me. And I imagine that in many relationships, that's a hard thing. And one might say, hey, I'm not the kind that can drop it overnight. I need a couple of days. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that's an excuse. I think that's an excuse because you feel like you're almost giving up on your stance in the argument by just saying, I need a couple of days. Whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't matter. I just need to show that I'm upset for a couple more days. And I think it takes some level of empathy and having to humble ourselves to saying, like, yo, this is you got to pick this up. This was you. This was a you problem. And I loved our more recent conversations, especially as we're approaching the 2 year mark of actually seeing more conversations where we're pointing at ourselves first.
Yeah.
And I think that took us a while to get there. And I think that pointing to yourself and saying, this is where I stepped out of line. And you're like, this is where I stepped out of line. And then we're giving each other advice in how to not step out of line for each other is now becoming a bit more of a helpful conversation rather than saying, I don't know if you realize, but you did that and you need to fix it.
Hmm.
And I think reframing that has come a long way for us.
No, definitely. And like that's actually a beautiful gateway to what I wanted to mention was I think in year two, we are understanding each other's behavior more. Um, and like I know maybe people might say that, that might have been we should have understood each other better when we were dating, but honestly like living together and being married is like a whole different ball game altogether, so you're learning so many new things, even much more newer things than when you were dating. And I think like what we are doing really well in year two is actually trying to get to the bottom of why there could be misunderstandings, right? Because it's always about overcoming the issue for us, not like holding a grudge or like pointing fingers or anything like that. Because in a marriage, like that's not going to work, right? And I think what we have been able to do in year two and during the end of year two, it wasn't always like this. Now where we are, like we are, I think what we're doing is we're becoming more self-aware and stopping ourselves in that self-awareness so we're not triggering the other person. And I think that's a beautiful place to be because even before an issue were to arise, we are becoming more self-aware. We're putting a stop to whatever we were doing and therefore in turn not triggering the other person, right? And I think it took us a few months to get to where
It
we
did.
are.
Mm,
And I love the place that we are at right now, right? Not
yeah.
to say like that our issues or arguments were super heated or anything like that, but just like the type of people we are, we really like we do live a fast-paced life, but we also like the slow side of things, right? Like, Saturday, Sundays, on the weekends, we like to enjoy in the morning, take a nice cup of coffee, just sip it and like enjoy just conversations with each other, right? So I think just the type of people that we are, where we were able to come with the self-awareness piece, I think it was really a game changer.
I think with the amount of coffee references, we may have to rename chai with the Chowdhuries to coffee with the Chowdhuries because I think we're not doing chai any justice here.
That's true.
But I want to also say that I think a big part of loving each other every day is highly misunderstood when people think of loving each other every day. And sometimes it comes with the perspective of treat the other person like it's a honeymoon every day. And I don't think that's realistic nor sustainable. And I think loving each other every day means that not every day is going to be a winning day. And there's some days that's going to really feel like a losing day. And when you have a few losing days in a row, it's going to feel like you're losing a lot. And I definitely feel a lot of those. Like I'm sometimes down. And I think adjusting and reframing and keeping space for that type of day is just as important as loving your partner as it is in the highs. Because the highs are easy. Like when we're on vacation, when we're sitting out by the beach, when we're hanging out and looking at sceneries or doing activities, believe me, it's easy, but some days are not. And those days are days like these days where you're at home and you're doing mundane tasks. You're working on the business, you're planning things out, and there's going to be slow days. And I think it's equally as important. Can I share my brilliant tool that I put out in the world that now resides on the side of our fridge?
Of course.
I don't know if any therapist is listening, but if you don't sell this product already, you can steal this idea. And if you don't, I'm going to create it one day. I'm so proud of the tool that we created to help each other communicate better. And it's not anything fancy. It's not a brand new tool that doesn't exist. It's how we use the tools that we have available to us. And I thought about this, and it was actually in a very critical part of a very low day for us. We weren't having the best conversation. We were arguing, and honestly, sometimes feeling defeated in that argument. And in the midst of it all, something beautiful happened where we decided to open up about how we're really feeling. And instantly, both of us started collaborating on an invention that we came up with on the spot. I instantly opened up Amazon. I looked up a whiteboard calendar, a magnet one that we could throw up on our fridge. And I said, you know what? Going forward, we're going to start communicating in a different way. We don't have to wait for someone else to bring up a problem. We're going to wake up every morning. I'm going to pick a color marker. You're going to pick a color. You chose purple. I chose blue. And all I'm going to do first thing in the morning is I'm going to draw half a heart, half of a heart. And I'm going to put that on the day that it is on. So if it's on a Monday, I'll put it up on a Monday. Then you come downstairs, you see that Mahfuz put up his half of the heart. Your job, if you choose to, is to grab the purple marker and complete that heart on your side. And if you don't, that means we didn't have a good day. That means something was off in our communication, and we get a chance to have that conversation. In a very similar manner, you have the same thing. You put up your shape, and if the blue doesn't complete, there was something that was missing. And seeing us do that completely and fill in the heart every single day consistently for so many days in a row to weeks in a row, it gets me so excited. And I have to tell you, all those TEDx things, the book launch things, and traveling things we talk about, nothing gets me more hyped than when I get up in the morning and I see us put that heart together. And that makes me, if you think about what it's really doing, is you're kind of starting the day by setting an intention to put that relationship forward first and reminding yourself that you're in control to make this a great day and you're in control to deal with even low days the right way. It doesn't mean that we buried the bad news. It means that we dealt with it in a very, very respectful way.
Exactly. And I just want to clarify, so for our listeners and viewers, that we put the heart, so we put the heart for the day before. So we let the day run and then go ahead and put our heart the morning of. And yeah, like I truly love that because it's a we're both visual people, and it's something that we can look at every day, and we can see that what, this was a great week, this was a great 10 days, this was a great 2 weeks, right? And not to say that we're not having like disagreements in that time, it's how we go about having that disagreement, right? Like, are we respectful towards each other? Are we trying to think of the other person when we're speaking? Are we trying to think of their triggers, or, like, and that's where the self awareness piece comes in as well, right? And I think it's a great, great tool. Like, for any couple out there that are perhaps, seeing that there is a little bit of friction, a little bit of conflict. I think having that visual representation is like really, it's really nice to see, right? It feels like you've accomplished something. So, and even though you're married, that is not the accomplishment, right? Like I think like the accomplishment of
True.
marriage comes after the fact.
Yeah, the game isn't over just because you put a ring on it. The game has
Yeah.
just begun.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also worth noting that if you don't achieve the goal of having a great day the night before, it's also not a bad thing. We will have an occasional one. We're not perfect. We're still learning how to work with each other. I actually love the fact that without anger, without resentment, we just take the brush and we wipe clean off the calendar and we start over. And we even write our best streak with like 10 days, 20 days in a row. Like it's kind of saying like this is our new record. And it becomes like we almost gamify it, saying let's try to surpass what we did before. And I think it does many interesting things. And actually, just hearing you explain what you just did, it actually made me realize right now that this is actually very much building out of the same model as your journal. Because the journal
Yeah.
is exactly that, right? You're
True.
feeling how you feel. And then at the end of the night, you're like, how do I feel now? And you're having a realization that you're in control of the in between. And I think this is the exact same thing is you reflect back on the night before, you gauge how you're feeling, and you realize that you're actually in control. Like I'm in control of even the fact that it failed. So I realize next time what I could do differently. So it brings awareness to a loop that I think most people do on autopilot. And we're catching it before the loop completes. And it allows us to actually be more productive with the way we navigate through those challenges.
Yeah. 100%.
What I think really also helps is looking at inspiration like our parents. When I look at our parents, I think it's really, really, it's really inspirational to see how many years they've been together and how they're still a very much a loving couple. And I sit down sometimes with their parents, and they open up about their childhood stories, which is some of my favorite stories to listen to. And I love the fact that they're not always just winning stories. Some of them were things that didn't go their way, and they did something about it. And my favorite thing is I almost feel like I am the audience watching us doing a podcast when they're ping ponging back and forth on a story and just listening to all the things that they've gone through to become this amazing couple that they are. And I remember that when we started dating, and I think about my parents, and I think about the fact that I never really felt like they found that best friend couple, the one that they would call besties and do double dates with. And I've always hoped that one day that my partner's parents would be the one that becomes that for them. And I can't tell you how much it means to me when I see them being best friends every day. Like we just took our moms out for Mother's Day, and as much as that was fun, I have to tell you that my most memorable moment of that entire evening was when we came back to the house and we just saw both parents almost like after Thanksgiving, like the belt is unbuckled, they're laying back, they're exhausted, they're sipping on chai. I knew there'd be some chai in the story somewhere. And seeing them just chat like you and I would with our friends. And I remember I had to stop, and I remember I even pulled out my phone and I had to like video a story because I was like, this is so special. And this is one that I'll remember forever. And in many ways, our parents reminds us of what's possible every single day in our future years.
Yeah. And honestly, my parents have definitely been an inspiration of a couple ever since I've grown up and I've been growing up. And just seeing them, even with you and you with them, is like just melts my heart every day. Like they definitely like love you so much, even like obviously my sister, and like seeing them with your parents. And even like I do want to shout out my extended family as well, right? Like even my parents, my extended family, like they have just welcomed your parents so much, and your
Yeah.
parents just feel so comfortable with everyone, like now they're even chilling like without us being there, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, wow, like I never even thought that this could be where we are now, right? And yeah, it's just like super beautiful to see. Like we just took our parents to cottage last year.
Hmm.
I guess that was like an overlap of our first and our second year. And it was so nice to
It was
see.
so special.
Yeah, it was really just a beautiful experience. Like Obviously we go to cottage with our friends, but taking like my family and I, we have done cottages before, but even just like going with your parents and my extended family, like it was just so beautiful. It was such a great time.
I come from a background where my family and I were growing up being very, very shy, very to ourselves, not very outgoing. Like cottage experiences wasn't even in our vocabulary. And I started experiencing at a younger age when I started doing it with my high school friends. And it always bothered me that my parents never got to experience that. And I remember when I would even bring it up to them, like I felt like I was putting on a sales pitch. I had to like convince them it was a good experience because they didn't understand what's so special about doing a cottage together. And I think part of them wanting to go was that your parents were so excited about wanting to go and seeing my mom and dad have their first cottage experience together last year and seeing my mom almost like the childish side of her that I don't get to see every day come out. Seeing that, I loved when all the ladies were like, "All right, ladies, to the jacuzzi or to the hot tub we go," and it's like you're kind of like trying all these things for the first time, and seeing her have so much joy that even today she still talks about like when are we doing our next
Hmm.
cottage, and that just became part of like a life experience that she got that came out of us wanting to really expose ourselves to new things and do new things together collectively. And I think that was such a special moment to me. And we're talking a lot about growth in today's episode. And usually when you think about growth, you're thinking forward. You're thinking in the forefront of what's to come. But I think what's also important to note is how critical it is to also pay attention to the roots of what allows you to grow. And part of what allowed me to grow, as someone that kind of had a very unorthodox childhood and grew up very differently from anyone else in my family and maybe anyone else in our culture. I was so disconnected from our roots, like our culture. And in many ways, I almost had like a chip on the shoulder. I was like, you know what? The culture wasn't there for me, so I'm not going to be there for them. But there's something very special about this year, and a lot of it to do with our families collectively getting together and having more conversations about the good old days and what our culture has to offer that we made a collective decision that I thought I'd never do. In fact, I remember the surprise of my parents' eyes when we looked at them and said, "We're going to Bangladesh together." That's something I never thought would have ever happened.
100%. And I don't even know how it happened, but your mom's like that I convinced you to go to Bangladesh, and I'm like, it's so much fun, right? Like obviously I have most of my cousins there, and I told you like, it's going to be so much fun. Like my family's quite fun there. It's just such a different experience with my family. And just seeing you with my family, with my two grandmothers, it was so beautiful. Like my family, they loved you so much. Without a doubt, I obviously thought that would be the case. But even like, I think in our last week that we were there, my cousins were like, "Oh, we like Mahfuz more than you." I'm like, I know. I can literally
They're
see it.
amazing. Such an amazing family that you have back home.
But tell me a little bit about your experience. Like I know you spoke to me a lot, but what about our listeners, our viewers? Like I think even when I talk about it with my friends, they just smile listening to it, right? Because it's such an incredible story.
See, I haven't been back home in over 20 years until that day. And my memory of the experience back home was very different and not something I would call fun. So when you told me like, "Hey, we're going to have a fun time. There's a lot to do there." I was in denial. I was like, you're trying to be a marketer here. Like you're selling way too hard. And I remember that the moment we arrived, and remember we landed at 3 a.m. And as we're walking up the 3 stories to get up to the door that we'd be staying in, the amount of excitement that I could feel as I'm approaching the 3rd floor from seeing 20 odd people from your family members greeting me at 3 a.m. with full energy and a cake that they made and a juice that your grandmother served me as soon as I walked up, that I actually went to bed angry that I couldn't reciprocate that excitement back to them. Like I was so happy and filled with anxiety that I was like, "Man, I've never been greeted like that in my life." And it was such a special moment to feel that first and foremost. But on top of that, every experience that we've done, whether it's personal time with your cousins, whether it's spending some time with the uncle and aunts, whether it's us exploring the city and seeing what it has to offer. I got to tell you, I've never felt more connected to my roots in those few weeks that we were there than I've ever have in my life. And as I got to know more and more of your family members and get to know their personal stories, the podcaster in me came out. I would ask a lot of questions and learn about their backstory, their origin stories, and it was such an eye opener to see how everyone is their own unique person. It's almost hard to categorize or even create a stereotype around what a someone from Bangladesh is, because every personality that I met that day had such a very different personality and a different story that it really opened my eyes. And we also realized that even my own parents that used to live there once upon a time didn't get to explore Bangladesh the right way. And I said, you know what? This isn't just going to be my first. This is going to be our parents' first. And you did such a cute thing with that you planned out with your family, where you and I took just my parents specifically out to a very well known beach, Cox Bazar there, that has its own resort. And we took our parents. We did like a little side quest and took our parents to stay at the resort there. And I didn't know it then, but when we were about to go out to the beach in front of our resort, my mom was like, "I've never actually stepped into the water at the beach before." I was like, "Mom, today's the day. We got to make it happen. Dress comfortable because you're stepping in." And I remember we took them out there and it was really hot. So at first, no one wanted to leave the beach chairs. But eventually, without me even prompting, this was such a proud moment, Priya. Seeing my mom and dad make the collective decision that, you know what, we're going to go walk on the water before we head back. Let's go. Let's go. And you and I laid there like the old people in the family. We were the grandpa and grandmas that day, listening to, I don't know, some Bengali music or something we found on Spotify. And seeing my mom and dad walk into the water. And again, that childish side of them, like I felt like I was seeing them as kids. I felt like they were who we were when we go out to the beach, when we're out and about. And it didn't stop there. Like those photographers that are hustling, trying to make money, approached them, and I was a bit annoyed because they were like getting my parents' way. But then I saw my dad said yes, and they're posing in ways I've never seen my parents pose, like your classic Bollywood look out in the beach, point up in the air, like run into each other's arms. Like, can you imagine? I don't even have a memory of that till that day. And I remember that when the photographer came back and was trying to get money from us, I was like, let me see what you did. And I took a look at the photos. I will forever remember those photos as such a special moment in my parents' life. And I'm actually so glad the photographer approached them, because we have a souvenir to
Mhm.
take back home with us. And seeing us get back home, and that became like my dad's profile picture on Facebook of them walking down the beach. It wasn't just special for me, Priya. It was special for the Chowdhury family. And it was special for us in a way that I feel like it awakened a side of me that I've kept buried well over 2 decades now. And a big part of that, I owe it to you. You've really created that lane of saying, we need to visit back home because there's a part of you that's missing. There's a piece that you've kept hidden. And I felt like I could have never truly be on the pursuit of my best self if I didn't address that piece. And it really lit a fire that I think not only brought you and me closer together, but got me closer to my parents. And my parents got closer together. And I think the mutual impact was shown in every minute of that vacation.
Yeah. And it all ties into growth, right? Like, uh, growth doesn't necessarily always have to be like, that you get the next best job or the next best whatever, right? Like you lose weight, that's growth. Like it doesn't always have to be like that, right? Like you making the decision to go back home, something that has been not necessarily like, maybe your past experiences, they were not as hyped up as to be. That's why you decided not to go. And you making the decision to even go back home despite past challenges, that's growth, right? Like because you have decided to step out of your understanding of what back home could be and decided to give it another chance. And same with your parents, like they also got out of their bubble, they got out of their shell, and like look at them now, like they are wanting to travel more, they are wanting to get out more, and um your dad says this all the time to me that like exactly what you mentioned, like I don't take credit for anything, like this is not something to take credit about. I think it more comes out from a place where, it's always been buried inside all of you, and now it's coming to fruition. And I love seeing that. Like,
Mhm.
it's just,
Yeah.
just so nice to see.
Yeah. And I think that it's also a fantastic takeaway for a lot of people that think their parents will never change. The ones that are frustrated, like, why can't my parents change their way of thinking? And you think they're at an age that they're stuck in their way of thinking and you can't do anything about it. And believe me, I've tried. I've tried verbally, I've tried through deep conversations, and I realized that they didn't need another conversation. They just needed exposure. They needed to see someone like your own parents being in a type of relationship and the type of sense of adventure that they thought couldn't be possible at their point in their life. And getting exposed to that has brought it aside of them. And I frequently talk about this very much with my friends, where I say some of my favorite moments. I think back to when we went over to my dad's to celebrate his birthday, and I remember, like, we were singing happy birthday, we're clapping around the living room, and I knew because we're singing that I should probably record it. And I pulled out my cell phone and I started recording us singing happy birthday to my dad. And it wasn't just singing happy birthday to my dad that was special. It was the fact that from all the things my dad could have done while we're singing happy birthday, he interrupted us singing just to tell you, Priya, how much change you brought to our family.
Yeah.
And I want you to know how much he means it, because I've never heard words like that come out of his mouth. And for him to do that in his birthday, I'm so glad I was recording with my camera when that happened, because that is one of those videos that will be an all-time video in my memory bank. Something that I will always lean back on when I think about the relationship that you have with my family and what you've done for them. I want to let you know how much you've not only impacted me as a husband, but you've impacted my entire family. And that isn't something that even doesn't get said. It's something that gets said from my parents to you every single day.
I'm getting like teary, but um that goes for you as well. Like, because my parents, they've always wanted a son, like it's just my sister and I. And like, the way that I see my parents interact with you, like, is just, like I've said this before, like, it's just so beautiful to see, right? Like, they love you so, so much. And like, I really love seeing that in our second year of marriage, and seeing like just not even our personal growth, but just growth all around us, right? Like, in our, even in our, like, just our circle all around, right? And I think like last year, I really wanted, I like prayed. I'm like, I really wanted this year to, like, just everything all around us to feel like, we are in the right path, in the right
Yeah.
direction, just growing towards what we are meant to have and what we're meant to be. And I really feel like all of the things that we have set up in place, in motion, I think like they have really set us up for the growth that we are accepting.
I
Something.
love that. And I don't even want to take a stab at guessing what the theme of our year 3 is, but I'm excited when we sit down a year from now and record our third episode, recapping the third year of marriage, just to really highlight what has come from all the things we put into motion this year. And I'm excited. I think there's going to be a lot of stories. Not all of them will be great stories. And I think it's worth for us to come in with that expectation.
Yeah.
But I think there'll be stories that we reflect on and grow from and become better because of it, but also knowing that the undying love and not giving up on each other is something that continues to be the forefront of our mind every single day. And hopefully, a lot more heart shapes that get completed on our whiteboard as we move forward. Priya, before we end the episode, I think we would do our audience a disservice if we didn't address some of the questions. Did you want to talk a little bit about what you did?
Yeah, of course. So this morning we put on our Instagram that we wanted our friends to ask us any questions that they had in mind that they wanted to ask us. And we did get a few, and I'm just going to go through them and pick out some ones that we can answer right now.
Let's do it. This sounds
Okay.
fun.
Yes.
Should have done this in year one now that I think about it.
I know. That's okay. Could be a tradition going forward.
Hmm.
Okay. What is your favorite moment from our second year of marriage?
I'm going to defer to you to start. Ladies first.
Okay. I think this was actually right after our first year anniversary where we celebrated our first year in Colombia, and we rented out a really nice tree house villa, I guess, on the top of a mountain, one of the mountains in Medellin. And it was like high up over the clouds. And, I say villa, but it was a very ordinary place where, we even had to cook our own food because it was just so high up in the mountain. There was nothing really accessible there, but we wanted to experience that because, we just wanted to be in nature, just be with
Yeah.
each other. And that was one of the surprises that I had given you for our first year. And why that was so memorable to me was, we really sat down after our first year. We connected on such a deeper level. We were like literally in the clouds. Like at one point, there was just so much clouds around us. We couldn't even see.
Yeah.
And we're like on the top of one of the highest mountains in Medellin. And like, we connected on such a level and speaking about the past, which was our first year, and then speaking about the future, like what's to come, what we're looking forward to in year two. And I can proudly say, like, now sitting on this chair where, our second year is almost like it's almost done. And I can really say like what we set out for ourselves on that treehouse place is really like we
Wow.
are working towards that.
Yeah.
And I think why that was also so memorable is because, you know, it was a vacation for us, right? But we weren't just there to chill or anything like that. We really wanted to do the work for us to be better. It was our first year anniversary. We're like, okay, we made it now. Like, we're done the first year. How can we grow from this? How can we be better? And we did that. I really feel like we did that this year.
That's a really special one. And actually, hearing you now explain the things we talked about and whether we achieved it this year or not, I actually never thought about all the things we talked about and where it went. And you're absolutely right. We've really acted on the things that we talked about, which is exciting. That's an exciting thing. My answer is gonna go a complete different path and the other extremity of not a as lavish of an answer. Because my favorite memory of this year, are you ready? Is when we ordered hot dogs in front of the Canadian Tire and we took it back to our car to eat the hot dog and had a fantastic conversation. And it was special to me for a couple reasons. First of all, the hot dogs, come on. Those are freaking amazing hot dogs. That already tops the list. But secondly, it took me back to our dating year. It took me back to when we couldn't go out during the pandemic time and we didn't have a lot of choices of things to do. So we would just bring takeout and sit in our car and get into some really, really fun conversations. And I felt like we did that again. It was almost like a throwback Thursday kind of day. And I remember we were sitting there and chatting, but the part that really made it my favorite is you are like when I say you're my biggest cheerleader, like you are the hype of the hypest. Like you sat there and you hyped me up in ways where you're identifying my potential that sometimes I don't even see in myself. You were like, look at what you've done in the last 3 years. Look at the level up. You know, you could be doing this, you could be even doing that. You're already doing so much. And like I remember like the confidence. Like I was like, should I pop my collar? Should I brush my shoulder? I was like so hyped. My ego was through the roof, but more importantly, it gave me a reassurance that sometimes I don't see. When you're in the trenches for so long, hearing the person that sees you every day, meaning the way you are when you get up and don't have your cup of coffee yet, the way you are when you're out and about, not just the way you are when you're posting on social media and still being able to hype me up that way. I got to tell you, it really, really gave that kind of alignment with who I was hoping I was becoming every day, with who I was becoming from your perspective. So I got to tell you, that was definitely on top of my list.
I'll always be your hype woman.
Yes, yes,
What I also love is that both of our answers had something to do with like conversations,
it does. Yeah,
growth. I love that. I love that
yeah,
about us.
yeah. Communication is something we do well and something that we're working towards doing better, which I think is amazing, an amazing practice.
It's true. Okay, second question is most surprising thing that you have learned about each other in year two.
Okay, I'll start with this one because I actually have a recent one. I was thinking about it actually on our way here.
Oh my god.
Um, you're such a creative person that what surprises me is that your creativity doesn't end when you're awake. It also happens in your dreams. Like sometimes you wake up and you tell me the most creative dreams that I'm like, okay, I know she's not kidding because there's no way she could have made this up. Like, for example, a recent one, if you don't mind me sharing,
Okay.
is you woke up in the middle of the night and you were like, my dad was a penguin and I was a penguin, and we were trying to figure out what it's like to be human. And then you're like, you met up with another penguin that wanted to try tea. Oh, we're back to the chai
Oh
theme
yeah.
here. What's up? And that penguin wanted to try tea. So you poured tea into his pouch and he started giggling. And I was like, I don't get it. And you're like, I accidentally poured it in his right pouch. And then you were like, and we weren't even the center of attention because we were on national TV and they were looking at some, I don't even know. Like it got wilder and wilder each time that I was like, how do you get this creative with your dreams? Like, what do you think about before your eyes close? And gosh, I could sit here and do another podcast just about your dreams. Like you have some of the most wildest dreams I've ever seen. And that surprised me a lot about you.
That's so funny. I actually don't even remember half of that at all.
Oh, believe me, I remember it.
That's so funny.
I wish I recorded it.
That's so funny.
Wait, what's yours before we move on?
Oh yeah, true. Okay. This is gonna be super hilarious. So you with food, like you are a picky eater. Like you are a little bit of a picky eater and you don't really like brown food except for like butter chicken and like my mom's cooking and your mom's cooking. But what surprised me the most was that you love paratha with a sunny side up egg. So paratha, for those of you that don't know, it's sort of like it's just like a different type of bread where
So good.
it's just like flour. It's just like normal dough, but then you fry it in like oil or butter. And then you can have it with like eggs or whatever, vegetables or whatever. And I remember making that for him one day, and then he loved it so, so much that now
I
every
expect it now.
weekend,
Every weekend.
every weekend, he expects it. And literally, I swear to God, one weekend we didn't have eggs or we didn't have the paratha, and he almost threw a fit. Like, and I'm like, are you kidding right now?
I, maybe it's part of going back to my roots, not only appreciating the culture, but the food that the culture has to offer. I got to tell you, my favorite feeling, and it actually happened this morning, is I got up and I see that you already have the two plates laid out with the pan on the oven because I know it's paratha day. And I was hyped because I was like, that's how you know. It's kind of like when you wake up in the morning when you were a kid and you're like, it's cartoons this Sunday, and you wake up early for the cartoons, or you wake up on Christmas morning because there's gifts under the tree. It's like that's for me every freaking weekend, and you started that tradition. I hope you like making them because that sucks if you have to continue doing this every weekend. But I got to tell you, it would throw me off my game if I woke up in the morning and that wasn't our breakfast over the weekend. But I want to thank you. You have a special way of making food, and it's become one of my favorite things of all time.
I love doing it because I love seeing the smile on your face when you see it, like literally every morning.
It gets me hyped. It gets me hyped.
And I love because this is actually a tradition that my mom used to do for both my sister and I when we were younger. So I really love that I can carry this tradition on with us as well. It's really nice to see.
Can I also just throw out there that I love that eggs tends to be the underlying message in every one of our episodes. Can we just make it a goal to continue bringing in eggs somewhere in our future episodes too?
Eggs and coffee, I guess, and chai
Yeah.
is the theme.
We're running out of time, but I want to just check if you have. Did you have any other questions? If maybe a quick one.
I do have one last one that we can go
Let's do it.
through.
Let's do it for the fans.
It's a new hobby or activity that we have started doing together this year. I want to go because I don't know if
I think we have
an
the
answer.
same answer. I
Yeah.
think I'm thinking what you're thinking. So why don't you give the answer of the day?
Swimming?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, like for those of you that don't know, we're learning how to swim. We thought that this would be a really great chance for us to get our body wet literally and learn. And we are in level 2 now, which has been really excited. So we started shortly after our first year in the summer last year, and then like now we're already in level 2 and we are set to be ending this level in June. So it's really, really exciting. I love the constant growth that we're doing, right? Like swimming, we identified that this is something that needed work for the both of us, and we really enjoy doing it now, right?
Well, we travel a lot, and I gotta tell you, nothing feels more awkward than when you're out at the resort pool and you're the only one standing in the corner of the shallow pool because we don't know how to swim and everyone else is partying it up in the deep end. So we made a decision one day, I think on vacation, that we're going to figure this swimming thing out. And, as much as we're only 2 levels in, I can't tell you more things that get me more excited than when we get that report card at the end of our class, letting us know we passed and got better at it. So swimming is without a doubt I think the coolest thing that we picked up, and I love that we're doing that together. Maybe as we wrap up, I want to just, and if I haven't expressed it enough in this episode, I can't stress enough how much I love you and how much of an impact that you've made on me, my growth over the few years, the support you've given. When I look back at my last 3 years, it overshadows all the years of memories that I've collectively gathered in my life. And it has, without a doubt, been the best years of my life. When people say the best is yet to come, I could not believe it more when I've tasted what our first 3 years together has been like. So, baby, I just want to say happy anniversary to you. And I'm so glad you agreed to do this silly podcast thing with me once a year in order to reflect back on our relationship.
And I want to echo those words, say to you, you have helped me to grow so much as a person. And like, I look back in my previous years, and there's a saying, it's like your future self is talking shit about you. And
Okay.
that's literally it. Like when I look back at me a few years back as now, I'm literally talking shit about that person. And I owe a lot of my growth to you. And I thank you for that so, so much. Like you are amazing. I hope you know. I'll always be your cheerleader. And cannot wait for what's to come.
Right back at you, baby. I love you.
I love you.